Hello team, this is Chris Abraham from MTEL Test Prep and ChrisTheMathTutor.com. Today's problem of the week looks at another way of looking at part-to-whole relationships. Let me know what you think. Thanks.
Hi team, this is Chris Abraham from MTEL Test Prep. Here's my response, the open response. We have here 3 different classes that you can take in college. An economics class, 101, an introductory to dance class, and a basic math class, maybe college algebra. Now, this is the breakdown of the students that took these combination of classes. 15% took the economics class, which was probably a very wise decision in these tough times. In our dance class, we had 20%, because let's face it, everybody loves to dance. And in our math class, we had, shockingly, 10%. Okay, well there was some crossover. There were some students that took dance and math, and that was about 10%. And there were some economics majors, and they also took some math. That was another 15%. Okay, and there were some economics and dance majors. That was about 10%. And there were some students that took all 3. They wanted a little bit of dance, a little bit of economics, a little bit of math, and that, let's say, was 10%. Now, there's all these other classes out there, so I don't want you to think this is equal to 100%. There's still a whole bunch of other classes that are offered. But let's just look at this snippet. If we add up all our percents here, thinking about who took just economics, who took economics and dance, and who took just dance, and we start adding up all these percents, let's see, we have 15, 10, and 20, 15, 10, 10, and 10 right here, and we add up all those percents. We gotta carry the 1 there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You get 90% of the student body that's accounted for. That's very important that you realize that just looking at this accounts for 90%. There's still, outside of this Venn diagram, 10% that were not involved in either economics, dance, or math. These might have been your art majors, or your music students, or your psychology majors. Who knows? It doesn't really matter. The point is that outside of this 90%, 10% were not accounted for. So let's take a look at this, looking at it in another way. So we know that out of 100% of the students, 90% were involved in activities. Or we could say, out of 100% of the students, let me fix that so I have more room. Out of 100% of the students, 10% were not active in those 3 activities. Now, if we know how many students there are, so hypothetically, let's say there are 1,000 students in this college, we could find out how many students were active. All we do is find out, how do I go from 100, sorry, that should be 1,000, 100 to 1,000? Well, I'm going to multiply by 10. So I would do the same thing for the top here, multiply this by 10, I would get 900 students were active. This represents the active students in either, those 3 categories, math, dance, or economics. Well, if the question on your test was, how many students are not active? Aha! Then you're thinking to yourself, this is that 10%. This is that group of students that weren't involved on the Venn diagram at all. So that would be using the same method, and I think I'll just make this a little larger to make my point. Using the same method, I have 100% of the students, 10% were not involved in any activities. There are 1,000 students in the whole school. What percent of 1,000 is 10%? You could do this, but you could cross multiply, you could do all sorts of things, but I like to do the arrow method. How do I go from 100 to 1,000? I multiply by 10, multiply by 10. I would get 100 students were not active during any of the types of classes that were offered. Now let's say this wasn't 1,000. Let's say you had something like, let's say you had 800. Okay, so that's not as easy because I'm not multiplying by 10, but it's not that hard. What do? 100 times what gets 800? 100 times 8. So again, 100 times 8 gets 800. What I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. It's only fair, right? 10 times 8 would get me 80. So roughly 80% of this, or 80 students out of 800 were not active in either dance, economics, or math. A lot of times I know they give the students work, and the students' work is only partially correct. You've got to look through it very carefully. Whenever you think about part to whole, you have to make sure that all your parts add up to 100%. And here we found out that the parts, when we added them up, only added up to 90%. Which means, if these are the percents, think of percents as parts. 10% is, 10 out of 100 parts of the whole. Well, 90% is 90 parts out of 100. So that means that I'm missing another 10% to get total students. The total number of students here. So that was that missing amount that you needed to find in answering a question like this. Okay, team, I hope you found this helpful.
Whenever given a Venn diagram with portions broken down like this, remember to look at the portions and add them up so that you find out what percent are actively involved in the Venn diagram and what portions are not. In this case, we had 90% were active and 10% weren't. Then you need to convert them using a simple ratio that we used before. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me at christhemathtutor.com. I'd be more than happy to help. Thank you. Bye-bye.